Okay, perfect. I think this is, I haven't heard from Mr. Mayo, but we'll start without him. All right, Thursday, May 5th, 2022, Halliwell Review Committee is called to order at 6:33. First item on the agenda is roll call. Ms. Chartier? Here. Mr. Gerton? Here. Mr. Corvo?
Here.
Mr. Nigerian?
Here.
Mr. Simpkins?
Here.
And the chair is here. Item number 2, public comment. And I will move on to the next agenda item. Agenda item number 3, review and approval of draft meeting minutes from January 20th and April 21st. Apologies that we didn't get the April 21st meeting minutes out, so we'll push that to the next meeting. And then I was doing some uploading of meeting minutes to the Secretary of State page, and I noticed that we hadn't approved January 20th. So I wanted to put that forth and get that taken care of. So I'll give everybody a moment to look at those, refresh their memory of back in January 20th.
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from January 20th.
Second.
Right. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Chris, did you want to hear about the DEM? Because I know you said you thought about moving some agenda
Yeah, I
items
wanted
around.
to shuffle one of the agenda items around. I think we can do the DEM thing first, but
Okay.
I wanted to bump the other community partnerships in front of the YMCA, since I think some of what, at least I wanted to cover there,
Sure.
might impact the YMCA discussion.
Okay. All right, so as part of our tasks that's been set forth by town council, I shared with you all an email thread with our town planner, Mark Carullo, about the viability of using wetlands and the activities that we can use. Also included, some of the guides that are provided by DEM. And, he goes on to, explain a couple different things. We need to have, a detailed biologist report. While the report that we got from Weston and Sampson was very well written and very thorough, we still need to go and actually flag within a survey the wetlands, which is typical of projects like this. And ultimately, he said, we could probably, in some further discussions with him, we could, theoretically propose things, but until we have a definitive plan to present to DEM of what we want to do, our assumptions are probably as far as this email thread can go. So I think if the members have any other questions, I was going to talk to everybody tonight, see what questions or comments there might be as far as the wetlands and the DEM process, and refer those questions back to Mark, invite him to our next meeting if we felt a burning desire to have him kind of explain process and further items like that. But really, ultimately, again, like I said, it sounds like we need to have a plan to present to DEM before they give us a definitive thumbs up or thumbs down on anything. So does anybody have any comments on that? Any questions? Yes, Mr. Mayo.
Only question I've got is, until we know exactly what we want to do with an engineer that's designed it, would a discussion with DEM be needed at this point?
No, I think we need to have a plan in place to.
But that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
So once we have a plan,
Yep.
then we ask them to come in. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But however, it might be wise for us to send up the chain of command the point that no matter when we do whatever it is we're going to do, if you don't flag and if you don't engage the water resources type professional, then nothing happens anyway.
Right.
So if we've established the fact and put the burden back on the council, if they are willing to accept the fact that everyone who has had anything about this property wanted to be able to enjoy outdoor activities, then we need to establish a benchmark to the town council to make it clear that an action item that could be entertained at any time, it has no impact on whether we're building 3 buildings, 2 buildings, or 1 building, could be started now.
Right.
That all could be flagged. That professional could then indicate the information flow will begin. So it does not have to be, you don't have to hold it and wait so that we have this beautiful little package, because you can't get the package until you get the pieces to the puzzle.
Right.
And one of the pieces is to pay the professional to go out there and delineate so that the DEM will accept and understand the magnitude of the wetlands. So I think we could be in a position now, based on that chain, to at least send it up to the chain of command, whether it's through our rep or through a formal, and say, if you want us to proceed, or if you want to proceed, this is the method by which to identify the wetlands. Put the burden on them to either say, thank you, we don't want to do anything right now, or thank you, can you get us some information so we can go further?
Sure.
Is there a lifespan to that kind of work? Like, if they did that, is it, valid for so many years, or?
Well, most people in that world will tell you that the best time to flag and walk is
Right.
when the water table is at its lowest. So clearly, that is, where we're at. If you flag and walk it when the water table is at its highest, clearly, you have to identify what you see. If you don't see it, then it's not there. If you see it 25% of what could be, that's what you observed. So, so I think those professionals would explain the nuances of how one does it where it is most beneficial to the applicant. Not that anyone is trying to do anything that isn't ethical, but again, what would you rather do? Flag the wetlands when they're at their highest point, or flag them when they're at their something less?
Bob, when you say delineate, put stakes in the ground, put flagging on trees, put iron pins in, draw maps, have...
Any and all of those things.
Yeah.
Any and all. And again, it depends on, all we're trying to do is create a chart so that we would know, for example, how many walking bridges we would have to build over wetlands. So then the professionals can say, okay, this is how you build an acceptable walk bridge without disturbing the wetlands. We need 20 of them, Mr. DEM rep, and this is how we're going to do it. And then the process continues, and they say, okay, meet this criteria, and you can build 20 ramps over wetlands. Because I think that's all we're really talking about at this point. How do we allow the public to use the natural part of the property, and of course, preserve our obligation to whatever the environmental rules are?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
The question I've got is, it sounds to me like what you're saying is have DEM come in and map the area. Is that what you're saying, Bob?
No, not DEM. They rely on professionals to do that.
Okay.
Submit it to them, they accept it.
So
and then you go from there.
you're suggesting we get professionals to do that. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, and that's what's
I'm just trying
done
to
every
understand.
day of,
Okay. I
on
guess
every
my
project,
question
yeah.
is, until we have an engineer to oversee the whole project and let him or her decide what needs to be evaluated, shouldn't we wait before we expend money on general information as opposed to specific information?
well, again, if you use that rationale, and you can, because it's valid, then you do nothing until you get one person. This is a sub-tier that can easily be achieved without waiting for this master plan
I
engineer.
understand. I think what my concern is, and it will be all night, and it will continue as long as I'm on this board, is I think the council, who's going to make the ultimate calls on everything, is looking for specifics. And I think if we say we're going to do an evaluation of wetlands before we've got a plan for the wetlands, I think we'd be putting in their minds the cart before the horse.
Yeah, but you can't do it that way. You have to identify the wetlands
So-
and then identify what you want to do with
I
them.
thought Weston and Sampson, or whoever we had, identified the wetlands.
Not sufficiently enough.
Not to the level that is expected for a DEM application.
Okay, so for the DEM application,
What you would need for a
What do we need?
DEM application is basically I believe it's a Class 1 survey of the entire property. So that includes flagging the wetlands, identifying where they are, and putting that on paper, because DEM's not gonna come out here and walk the property. They're gonna look at a full survey of the property. And typically, in projects like this, as an architect, we expect the owners of the property to provide a survey. So it could be done two ways. We could have the architecture and engineering firm be responsible for providing it for us, or we could get, as Robert's saying, a jump on it, get it done anyways, because it does need to get done. You know, and then we provide that information to the architecture and engineering firm. So it's one of those things that the whole property needs to be surveyed. The wetlands would just be a portion of it. We need to know grading, we need to know where utilities are, we need to know everything about that property, regardless of what our plan is, because we're doing something there. So typically, when I get a new job in, the owners or the towns or representatives, they give us the survey. They say, here's where the wetlands are. The civil engineers understand that. We have it in our computer program, so we can then start to do work as a site plan.
okay, I guess my confusion is, and you're in the business, and you're in the business, so I understand. Our company we had, Weston Sampson, whatever, they gave us a very I thought, a detailed, here are your wetlands,
They did.
okay? That wasn't clear enough, that wasn't specific enough, is that what you're saying, Jeff?
Yeah, that was, what they did was they researched where the location was, and we have in town, as all towns do, have a program called GIS, Geographical Information Systems. They plug that information into our GIS. So we can see on the GIS program where the approximate wetlands are. These aren't definitive, flagged exact pinpoints of where the wetland boundaries are.
Okay, so what you're suggesting, Robert, is that we have somebody come in and specifically identify where they are? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, in short, yes, but there's two methodologies. I mean, your line of thought is fine. You can do it that way. And what you're doing is it's the path of least resistance, because you're saying to the town council, once we get this quote-unquote design firm engaged,
Yep.
they will do everything, and no one will ask another question because they're the design engineers. All I'm saying is a two-part component. We were asked to establish this base level of information, and we did. So if we want to keep things moving, and we want to push the council to start making definitive decisions, then this is a proactive approach in that vein, where we say the environmental design criteria has nothing to do in many respects with the architectural component. They are going, the Class 1 survey is the binding legal document. A Class 4 is a general overview, again, using GPS, using this and that. The Class 1 is a stamped, it's the highest level of survey that says that your boundary line at your house, for example, is exactly where we say it is. It's not an approximation, it is. So that Class 1 survey is important. And then by flagging the utilities that are or aren't there, in the wetlands that are or aren't there, that is one more piece of the puzzle, that when we solicit these bids and these engineers and designers, that's a very vital piece of information that they know they don't have to charge us for because we've already paid for it. We minimize the cost because we paid for it directly as opposed to paying them to pay somebody else to do the
I
same thing.
understand what you're saying.
So there's a twofold. We start the process in a progressive forward motion, something to show the people that we're doing something. And if you want to add politics to the equation, we put the pressure back on the council and say, you asked us to do something, we did it, and this is the action item that we're suggesting based on that information. And then they say, no, fine, thank you, we don't want to do it. Or, you know what, let's keep this moving so that the people feel that we're doing something. And there won't just be feeling, it will be the truth. We're doing something. So it's two-part. One is, it's obvious, it can be done. And secondly, it keeps us viable and it keeps the people engaged. Because at least we can say that there's some forward progress.
I guess what I hear you and I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to read the people we're dealing with, making decisions for the community. I don't know if they understand the direction you want to take.
Well,
Okay?
let me
I don't
say
know.
something that would
That's all I'm saying.
maybe help that. You know, one of the lower touch things that we're thinking about, you know, recommending we do with the site, right? Trails, walking trails. It's not expensive. And it's one of those things that you could do, you could start this summer, right? Start clearing out some trails. I think having that survey done and knowing where those wetlands are would help us to even begin that process, right? Thinking about how you might get across some streams, like what DEM is even gonna allow us to do down there? Where can those trails be, right? I think, you know, we could put it off until we have a more definitive site plan in mind, but doing it now lets us move some of those smaller things forward, I think.
Actually, you probably can't get approval to do anything, and that DEM approval, unless you have stamped drawings, right? You need to have engineering done, you need to have, we can't, I mean, it's all theory, unless we have to go to permitting to DEM to do anything over there, you gotta show them where the wetlands are, and that's gonna be done by a surveyor. I think what Bob described was design build versus plans and specs, right? And if you're doing plans and specs, you've got a plan, you've got a drawing, stamped engineered drawing showing exactly what we have and where it is, and that's what the DEM typically requires, from my understanding, to do anything with the property. So it's a first step no matter what direction you go in. I personally think it makes sense.
Chris, what do you think the council wants to see? Would they like that? How do you think they're going to respond to us coming back with that as a plan? Which
So-
I don't disagree with, I'm just asking, how will the council react to that? I sort of think I know the council, but maybe I don't.
Yeah, so I think the reality is, I think it's all on how it's worded. And I've been taking notes and kind of phrasing it in a way where it's got to get done either way. At first I was on board with you because I completely understand where you're coming from. But then as we started talking, it's not as though we're putting the cart before the horse. It's got to get done anyway. And whether we carve it out and pay for it, we're going to end up having to pay for it anyway if we hire, you know, someone to develop some sort of master engineering plan.
I think my only motivation here was to put something out there, to be proactive, and to keep things moving. I'm fully aware, and I understand, respect what you're saying, Bob, and you may be 100% correct. But if we don't do our job, if you will, and say to the council, look, the engine's running, we're ready. This is the next step. As Steve just said, it has to be expended no matter how you cut it. So that was my only thought, was to light a fire, to get things moving. And the other thing to keep in mind, which the environmental people would confirm, is that the DEM's rules are changing in June from 50 to 100 feet. Now that may or may not impact what we're talking about because it's a trail crossing over a wetland. But if you're building a structure the setback from the wetlands is going from 50 feet to 100 feet. We can't, we're too late in the game. The building will have to comply with the new 100-foot setback. And I don't think it applies to the past because they're not structures. So, but a lot of things are changing at the DEM. And I don't want to belabor this. I just put this out there because I don't want it to be a negative, and it's not to be intended to be a threatening approach to the council. It's intended to be a proactive, let's get things going, achieve what we can achieve so that the perception is that we're doing something.
Okay.
You know, I was just going to add one thing. One of the things that came up in the previous town council meetings were dedicated benches around the town. And, you know, we don't want to dedicate 100 benches a year to people. You know, it's like, how do you say no to one and yes to the other? So we're trying to figure that out. But this might give us an opportunity to, you know, possibly have that as an option where someone could donate a bridge on the trail where they obviously, you know, they would be responsible to cover the cost of the lumber and, you know, maybe we have an Eagle Scout or a pack, the local pack build it as part of a community service, or even a senior project. Maybe they commit to raising funds to build 2 of the wetland bridges or whatever. So I mean, there's opportunity that we can do that'll collectively kind of unify the town if we move forward with this recommendation.
Can I add something, please? I've got to get better at jumping in because my voice isn't as loud as you guys. It's also the environmentally right thing to do. We need to take that approach too, that we need to know what's going on with our water. We've shut down our rivers for 100 years, and we've destroyed our water. So let's go in, we're talking about water that we're working with. So we need to, this is the environmentally responsible way to do this.
I don't question any of that. I guess the question I've got is, before we go out and ask the council to fund a design engineer, what other pieces are necessary? Now we're saying potentially getting this done, the wetlands, what else would there be involved before we ask the council to please fund us a design engineer to work with someone on the plan?
At this point, the survey that we're talking about is just purely documenting existing conditions. We're not doing any design work at this stage of a survey.
I understand that.
So-
What I'm saying is, we do this survey, which I totally agree is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
But besides this survey, what else do you people who are professionals feel we need to do before we ask the council to fund a design engineer?
Nothing.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Jeff, do you know roughly what the cost would be for a delineation?
So, I know Tom Kravitz, our previous town planner, had reached out to both Weston and Sampson and another local firm for doing survey work. I'm not sure the class survey. So the surveys are broken down into 4 different classes in Rhode Island. Number 1, class 1 is the highest, you know, most highest detailed. So that includes wetlands, contours, locations of buildings, property lines, what have you. What Weston and Sampson provide us in our report was a class 4, which is basically what's called a title search. They go over here to the town clerk's office, they find the plat number, and they basically record, you know, the meets and bounds that are recorded in the town clerk's office. That's as far as class 4 goes. Class 2 and class 3 entail, you know, lesser degrees of a class 1, but will be fully accepting if somebody out there, whoever's watching, corrects me, because I'm not a surveyor. But I'm under the impression that a class 1 survey would be the appropriate survey to have done of the property. I know some other council members had mentioned that there was a survey done of the property at some point. However, I have not seen any of that information come forward from either the administration or the councilors that have mentioned it. So it could be out there. We could ask the question if to have somebody on the administration do a little bit more digging to see if we can find it. But ultimately, it's sounding like we should make a recommendation this evening and with a motion that says we recommend to perform a Class 1 survey of the property so we can have that information, have the wetlands flagged appropriately, and then whenever the design period comes down the road, we are ready to provide that information to whatever consultant comes to us.
Might the school department have that? Yeah,
I can ask.
yeah, but I would think since it was their property, they might have that survey.
I know the superintendent has posted a lot of documents on his Google Drives that he has, and I've done some extensive digging and found as much Halliwell information as I can, so I'll look again at it,
Yeah,
but
I'm just asking.
can
To-
certainly ask the question.
To re-ask my question from earlier, because Robert, you answered something that I didn't know I had a question about, but it wasn't quite what I asked. If we did this now, and 5 years from now, I hope it doesn't take that long, but some building project finally gets underway down there, and they need to look back at what was done, is 5 years too long of a period? Like, is there an expiration date on what is delivered to us?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't think there's an expiration date unless we have an enormous landslide over at the property that would significantly alter the area. If we had a 100-year flood, that would significantly alter the area. I think if it remains as is in the next 5 years, I think we're pretty well set.
I think the other thing to just keep in perspective is that this is primarily as it relates to non-structural work. Siting the building or buildings is relatively easy when you look at what you've got for topography and what you've got for wetlands. This is for us to be able to know how best we can utilize the natural component. So that's that, and I don't know, Jeff, are surveyors listed on that state criteria, a pre-qualification?
The master price agreement, I believe so, but it would also be dependent if it costs less than $30,000.
Okay, and we
So-
both know that through planning and zoning, we have countless highly qualified civil engineering firms that are, they do both. They do survey work and they do civil work.
Yep.
So there's plenty of highly competent entities out there that can perform this Class 1 survey, and we also have, in Burrville, a professional that does a lot of work for the town and through other, for private work, to delineate the wetlands. So the professionals are there. It's just a question of getting the authorization, if so granted, to solicit, and whether they want to solicit, meaning the council, or they want us to do it through another one of your
master place.
RFP things.
I can certainly reach out to the planning department, see if they can reach out to their connections, kind of get a general idea of the cost. And then if it's able to go through the MPA, then I would say we continue that way and work with the planning department to get that done.
So this motion would be to ask permission of the town council to investigate further?
I would
How
say,
do you want to word that?
I would say at this point, why don't I should have a conversation with Mark so he can have the conversation with some surveyors so we have a definitive idea of cost. Because I know the question is going to be, the ultimate question is, how much is it going to cost? So if we can definitively give them a range or show them some proposals that are going to say it's going to be X amount of dollars, then why don't we get that information? Because I feel like with the council, the more information we're able to provide to them, the better.
And we have the authority to do that. We're not going to ruffle any feathers.
I wouldn't think so.
Okay. I mean, it's a fairly trivial matter if you take us to task for it.
We're
but-
furthering our investigations.
Exactly.
So,
Okay.
and we're
Can I-
doing
can I-
we're doing our homework so we can provide a a full picture to the town council.
Well, I move that internally we proceed as the chairman just noted.
Can I ask, the name of this is a Class 1 environmental survey, is that correct?
This is a Class 1 survey. Just Class 1.
Don't you have to say environmental?
No.
A Class 1 survey of the land.
Oh, yep, or the property.
All right, 'cause I'll talk to Al Seepy tomorrow, see if he can find, if we've got one, in the
Sure.
school records, because
Okay.
I think that could help. And he's a pretty sharp guy. Just
Well,
a
if you-
Class 1
If you see the survey, under the notes of the survey, it will say whatever it is, class 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Yep.
So he may not know. He may say to you, I have a survey plan, then one needs to look at
It
the,
has to be a Class 1 survey.
it will say class 1.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll get Mark on the phone tomorrow morning and see if we can get that ball rolling. So then we. He says he's got something, I'll let you know. Okay, perfect. All right. Pretty sharp guy. Yep, great. Okay, any other conversation about the Wetlands DEM update? Okay. Chris, you wanted to move number 6 up to before number 5 for the agenda.
Do we have to make a motion to do that, or just do it?
We'll just do it.
Just do it.
We're an advisory board. We're not a semi-fiduciary board.
Nobody's ruffling their feathers about this. Yeah, so I guess Jeff and I had a meeting with the library board. When was that? Last Tuesday?
Last Tuesday.
Last Tuesday. And it was pretty interesting. I think it was sort of spurred, I had homeschooled my kids in the first year of the pandemic, and libraries were like a lifeline for us. Unfortunately, we found ourselves going to other towns pretty often because our library is so small and sort of limited in what they can offer. We wound up going over to Jesse Smith Library in Burrville a lot. We drove as far as like West Warwick, which had a lot of great programming. But I always wanted more from our library. And so it got me thinking, in a lot of these towns, the library is, in essence, the center of the community in what they offer for services for residents and, the kids who spend time there. It's sort of, this multi-generational hub. And then, timely enough, Jeff had come across this article in the Architects magazine speaking about just that. The library is an intergenerational hub. So in the midst of all this, we had met with the board of trustees over there, lovely group of folks, to just get a sense from them if, they were aware of what we were working on, and if there was, any general interest in exploring the library being a part of the project in some capacity. And what we discovered in talking to them was a lot of the things that they would love to offer and are positioned to offer are the things that residents have asked for from the Halliwell site. And the library just can't offer them right now because they don't have the space. They don't have the dedicated space for it because the building that they're in is so small. So I don't know. I came away from the meeting with the impression that there's a real opportunity and certainly, a desire to continue discussing if maybe there's something to be done.
This is one of the big things as we reviewed the comp plan was that the library was referenced to move into the Andrews Mill. For those that don't know where the Andrews Mill is, it's as you go down Victory Highway before you cross the bridge and turn into St. Paul Street. So the comp plan referenced that they're going to move into there. That's not going to be the case, however, because Neighborhood Works of Woonsocket has bought the building and they're developing that building. So we've essentially left the library now is out of the comprehensive plan. When Chris and I were there, I asked, one of the things I asked was, what were your future hopes and goals that you would like to see for this building? And they gave the answer that they're basically just maintaining their programming as it stands. And I had asked, well, would you like to expand your program? Would you like to, be able to provide maker spaces or quiet study rooms? And the comment from the library director was, we are maxed out. We can't provide any further programming, even though we would love to, because we are maxed out for space. And then the other reason, I do libraries almost every other day in my office. One of the things that we say when we go to a project interview is that libraries have really become the community hubs, community centers of every town that we're working in. The program, it's more of a space than just books. The programming that they offer, the technology that's offered, the ability to, just reach the full gamut of ages that are in the town has just.
What we already have is a library, that's all.
I'm curious though, part of what we're gonna do whenever this firm is on board is to flush out the list of great ideas until we chisel them down to viable ideas. And what component is too much, what components are not enough. So I guess the question that I had is, if we have this opportunity, we should develop it a little further, just like we did with the Y, so that we can determine the magnitude and the scope of what it possibly could be. We're not committing anything to anyone, but at least we're able to then give to these design professionals a concise, or at least a preliminary review of another component in their design. Can they effectively add it? So the follow-up to your meeting was, I'm assuming we have the authority to have a meeting here with
that does want to come to this joint meeting. If the whole board is going to come, they need to post it as a public meeting, which shouldn't be an issue. Or I gave them the month of May to kind of decide if they would like to have a representative from their board join us on the June 2nd meeting. So I'm hoping that we have a few more seats here in our audience filled with those members, because again, it's part of this partnership throughout town that I want to hear what Parks and Rec's future goals are, so we can identify some action items that we can accommodate within the Halliwell property. I want to hear what Conservation Commission is planning to do with how they plan on, keeping track of walking trails within town and potentially incorporate the Halliwell property into that. And I also want I've also invited the Senior Citizens Board so that they can attend and join. Again, relaying their goals and action items that we could potentially be taking. And then I also invited the planning board to just have that double check that we are still, in fact, in compliance with comprehensive plan. If there are any, being on the planning board myself, I don't see that we're vying down a different road than what's already written throughout in our comp plan. But just to have those groups be able to come, speak, identify what their hopes would be for how we can have this all-encompassing building between a library, a Y, outside Parks and Rec, just to really start to nail these items down a little bit.
Did you also mention historical?
I did not.
I'm wondering if that, just as a respect of their position, that, even if they choose not to come, it might be good to extend the invitation.
I was going to start with the boards that I mentioned first, and then start to build upon that. Because I think if we have too many boards at once, it might get a little chaotic. So I wanted to kind of identify some of the boards that we've already talked with, have them come back and chat. So.
Yeah, and I think in light of what you just said, we have to monitor or steer so that the conversation is new and productive.
Yep.
That we talk about what their needs are. We don't need to rehash what we already know.
Exactly.
But for some of the others that haven't been in front of us, or we haven't engaged in a formal process, Parks and Recs, fundamental. What do you see? Can you use something over there? And all of the other groups as well. But as long as we stay focused and we keep the conversation, productive and fresh, then it's another way of being inclusive.
Okay. So we'll stay tuned for some further potential community partnerships as we track down our way. All right. So is there any other conversation, any more discussion that we want to have with other community partnerships? Okay. All right. Then we'll head back to number 5, discussion, consideration, and action, YMCA of Northern Rhode Island Partnership. So I took the hour and a half and listened to the meeting with the representatives from the Y. All of it sounded very promising. There were great ideas. The ultimate takeaway that I came away with is that we need a plan. We need some sort of master plan, because they won't be able to do a market analysis of what we're going to be putting, because they don't know what we're putting in the building. They can't appropriately do a market analysis for membership and what kind of activities and programs that they can put forth. That was the ultimate takeaway that I got. Everything else sounded good to me. I was certainly impressed with the presentation, their offerings, what they could potentially provide for this town. But in the end, it sounded like they were asking, okay, what's this going to look like moving forward? It sounded like they were pretty flexible and amenable to whatever kind of agreement we want to get put in place with council. So, I think that door is wide open for us. We just need a more definitive plan of what exactly is going to go down there. I don't know if anybody else.
Was a report made to the council
For?
Summarizing the outcome of the meeting?
No, not
Okay.
that I know of. Unless you made mention of it on Monday.
Yeah, just the basic mention. I didn't get into the questions and answers. I reviewed them, but I didn't get into them.
Well, I think at this point, I don't think we could have hoped for anything more than what we got. We're at a certain place in time where they certainly can't go any further than they went. They gave us creative and positive reactions to just about every. I was under the weather that night. I really wanted to. That's not the meeting I wanted to miss, but it all looked very good. So I think we should be quite pleased, and I think we should, if we have the legal authority, just respond to them that we're in a holding pattern until we get a design team assembled, and at that point, but that leads to the next question, which is, at some point, say we're 8 months down, and the design firm has come for their first meet and greet. At what point do we reach out to the town council to find out, do you or do you not want to continue this exploratory relationship with the Y? Because the first thing the design engineers, as you know, or the architects are going to say, oh, what are we putting in the building? We can't say to them, well, we think we might have a deal with the Y. They're going to say, well, what do you want me to do? I can't. So I guess the next question is, we know it's pretty clear that we have the option for a viable working relationship. So then we have two issues: the legal implications of can a municipality, what are the legal methods by which a municipality can get into a contractual agreement with an outside entity? That's a very complex matter, which I think the solicitor should offer some opinions on. And or is there the political will by the council to engage with this entity? You may be pushback from members of the public that don't want it. So all I'm suggesting is that we know that we had a positive meeting and a positive platform up to this point. But I think we need to now reach out to find out what are the legal implications. And at this point, does the council want to bless it to go further or not? Because I think we need that answer before we have an engineering architectural firm on board. Do you agree?
Yeah, so I think that the exploratory of really any partnership, but specifically the YMCA, I think is very intriguing to the town council. But I agree with what you said, Bob, is we don't want to find ourselves in a position as a town council to find an engineering firm to develop a master plan, only to then find out that we're duplicating our efforts pursuing the partnership with the YMCA, right? Because they, from what I gather, the YMCA has just as much resources that they can tap into, if not more, than if we were to just go out on our own and develop a master plan. And now we're basically paying for something that potentially the YMCA could create at essentially their cost.
So I'm going to stop everybody for just a minute and do a little Rhode Island general law bidding situation. Because we are a public entity, we are bound by law to put out design contracts and construction contracts out for what's called the request for qualifications. If we partner with the YMCA or any other entity, because we are still a municipality, we still have to abide by the Rhode Island general law. So regardless of what resources the YMCA may have as far as designers and architects and engineers, we cannot specifically engage in contract with them, because the way around it would be we have to sell the land, give it to the Y, and then that's what the Y do their thing. If we want to maintain control of what's being down there, we cannot do that. So that's kind of a basic 101 of bidding and design and construction for Rhode Island. So while it's great that they have the resources, we can certainly invite those resources to the table, but we would need to employ our own architecture and engineering firm.
I was at the meeting. Unfortunately, some of you weren't, and that's too bad. Basically, they said, you'll need to have your own design engineer. We will have people to work with you and him for the formulation of a program. Is that how you remember it, Tony? Yeah. Okay, so it goes right along what you're saying.
Yep.
We have our own. And Steve, what they're saying is, we will help you, but as Jeff's saying, by law, we have to have our own. So it was a invitation for collaboration of abilities and expertise. Mm-hmm. And we felt, those of us that were here, it was very positive. I also think, in looking at the demographics, I don't know if you folks have it, but if you don't, you should get a copy of the demographics.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah. This is a good deal for them, okay? They want to have something happen beyond Woonsocket. I got the impression they'd like to move forward on this in as rapid a fashion as we can do it. If we delay 8, 10, 12 months, the opportunity may go away, in my opinion, based on listening to them. They are right here ready to jump and work with us. But it also is going to be very profitable and helpful to them in their thinking. So I'll just leave it there for right now. But I think
that's why I brought up, that's why I said what I said. We need to, we need to get either
right.
the blessing from the council or not.
We need, I think, as a group, to come up with a recommendation, a proposal, and a vote to the town council that we would like to pursue consideration of a YMCA and other entities on the Halliwell property, and we ask their blessings. And to do this, we're going to need a design engineer. We did.
You basically reiterated what we talked about at last meeting, when we determined that that was the direction we wished to present to the council to consider going in. Correct. Right? I totally agree. Yep.
Yeah, but that is in total what my intent was. We're at a point now where the council has to go on record to either say, we endorse this, and we want you to interact with them as you design the property.
Yep.
Or, thank you, we'll get back to you. Because this all then, let's not forget the politic involved here.
Mm-hmm.
We can't be naive and think that there aren't members of the community that may not want the YMCA engaged legally. And
No doubt.
that's them. So the council or the leaders, elected political leaders, they have to weather and differentiate and navigate through that, and that's their burden to determine what they want to do. We've done everything we can, and now we're just asking them to take their authority and exercise it, either to say, we're 100% behind this, we want you to engage them, and see, but then this also closes that circle, which they made us stop writing, which was, we're not going to engage a design engineer firm until we know what we're doing. That's exactly. So this is the manner by which we say, we're ready to do this. If you're not, then again, we're going to be staring at a red light. If you are, we have a live fish on the hook here, and we can move forward. So this tries to close that circle, but we all saw that there was apprehension from the council to closing the circle, if you will. So the only way to determine it is to push it back up, Steve, and say, we're ready. The Y was quite receptive. We need a design firm to start it, and the mission is multifunctional. We've already stated what it should be.
I'll go further. If we don't do that, then we're basically directionless, right? Or we need to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
Which we've spent the last year
And
doing.
we're tired of doing that.
So, yeah, so. Yeah. So, we've investigated, we went through discovery, and we had a lot of discussion. So, I've said this multiple times, we are not decision makers. We rely on the council to make that determination for us. And I'm ready for a decision. And I think the rest of us are too. So, yeah, I agree with what you said, Bob, and both of you, both Bobs. It's time to determine, for the council to determine what direction we're going to go in.
Yeah. I think that Jeff brought up a good point, though, and I had it in my notes prior to Jeff saying it, that we've got to get Park and Rec, the seniors, I hadn't thought of conservation, and we have to tell them, here's what we're thinking of doing. Do you guys have anything that you'd like to see in that? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? How would you like to see it? I think if we have their endorsements along with our recommendation, I think that'll be a very positive plate to put before the council. But I think that looking at the big picture, you guys, well, you looked at the library, great idea. If we get room, I think it's a fantastic idea. It's a community center then. It's fantastic. Love the idea. Park and Rec, seniors. I had a list at home, and I went to the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, the Little League, and we can go crazy. They'll all fill in. But the main ones we have to look at are Park and Rec, as part of the town, seniors, Linda Tebow's been out there forever looking for someplace, and of course, food pantry, which is part of the thing we talked about. But if we have all those people supporting our recommendation to the council, Steve, I think that'll be a very powerful plate to put before them. Thank you.
One question in that regard. I understand that approach, and I I think it makes perfect sense, but my only concern is, for Steve, because we have to be honest, would that be perceived as a threat? That we went beyond our jurisdiction, we solicited opinions from all of the other town entities, and we came to the town council almost, I'm not saying it is, I'm just asking from a political point of view, will they take umbrage and say, who do you think you are? You don't go to Parks and Recs
But-
and tell them.
But
That's my
isn't that
point.
what they asked us to do?
Well, that's what I'm asking, because it's a double-edged sword. If you go too far, you get pushback because now we're telling them what to do. We want to be careful about that.
Here's what our charge says. Explore partnerships with community-based organizations. I would before I said anything, I reread it, community, but that doesn't necessarily mean Parks and Recs and formal entities of the town. So that was my only question. Would it be perceived as a defensive reaction that we're being too aggressive? I love the idea, but I'm looking at it, how will it be received? That's my question.
Well, I think some it might be and some it won't. My concern is that getting all of those entities to get on board, obviously it's not going to happen overnight. And, I think right now as a town council, we're trying to abate the property and essentially have a clean slate, and we're in the process of that now. In fact, we should be getting an update by the next town council meeting. But I know that that's kind of front and center for them now. And unfortunately, there's some on the town council that only drive in one lane, and that's all they can see. So I think if you ended up bringing and saying, oh, we checked with other entities within town and they're on board too, I could see how some would view that as kind of, and I hate to use this analogy, but kind of ganging up.
Well, here's the other thing too.
I don't think it's right, but
We've also been tasked from the get-go to conduct public meetings and accept public comment on the potential future uses of the Halliwell buildings and property. That right there gives us the ability to have these conversations that we've been having since day one. Whether it's a member of the Parks and Rec Board, whether it's a member of the Smithfield Heritage Association, whether it's someone who doesn't even have any affiliation, but their address is in town. That gives us the ability, that sentence right there gives us the ability to figure out what we're doing.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly, but all I'm saying is maybe we should consider going to the council now, prior to meeting with the library and the other entities, and just say we have a very viable, because that's front and center. That is, no matter what these other entities say, the Y relationship is the most substantial, significant part. Say to them, we're ready to solicit design firms, and then we will carry along with the other entities as we get them. We don't, or we wait 3 weeks, a month, and we say, yeah, we've met with everybody. It's just a matter of whether you send a letter now or you send a letter in 6 weeks.
So that wouldn't be a foreign concept to the council, right, Steve? The council's fully aware of the conversations we've had with the Y and, well, the discussions we've had around it and the general consensus, I think, of those discussions. So
yeah, and I think, from the time that they initially revised the charter to now, I mean, it's been 2 months, so, I don't think it's out of the box for the committee to come back and say, all right, hey, we took 2 months, we met, a few times, and this is what we came up with the wetlands delineation, which is what you asked us to do, so we're reporting back, and we'd like council to take action on it. And by the way, the second thing you asked us to do was partnerships. We see the overwhelming potential with the Y. Here's why, and no pun intended. And we want the council to take action.
So maybe it's the process we're looking at, right? It's either we go to as Bob suggested, we try to get buy-in, we try to get potential stakeholders who might support it, or we make a recommendation to the council, and then maybe the council has a public hearing on it and invites all those potential stakeholders to have a discussion around moving forward with some sort of collaboration with the Y.
I guess my question would be, we present to the council, we want to go further with the Y, that their first comment might be, well, have you talked to Park and Rec? Have you talked to Linda Tebow and the seniors? How do we know they're going to be big stakeholders in this? What have they think about it? So if we do that before we go to the council, then we can say, yes, we have. As a matter of fact, they endorse the idea. So we don't have to say, delineate everybody we've talked to, but we can say we've talked to many organizations, many people in the community, and we find support for this proposal. Then if they say, well, did you talk to Linda Tebow? We say, yes, we did. Oh, did you talk to Kate? Yes, we did.
We already know this. We've spent 8 months. We presented the survey. We gave them all the results. They know this. All I'm saying is, if we simplify it by saying just what Steve said last, we have the why. That is the most significant part of the puzzle. We now urge you to give us the authority or to move to the next phase, which is to engage the designers, because those designers are the ones, it's more viable for us to have the meetings with the municipal groups, with the designers present, so they can hear the Parks and Rec say, you know, we could use a football field, or we could use a tennis court. And the seniors reiterating what they've told us 4 times already, and what the youth may say, or whatever other group, or the library may say. They're the designers. When it's like Jeff going to, if we have a meeting with all these people and Jeff is our architect and Jeff isn't here, he's not benefiting because he didn't hear what they wanted. So what I'm saying is, let's do progressively. Get them to decide that it's time to choose a course. We all know it's a community-based structure. That's all we know to know at this point, and it's inclusive of seniors and youth and whatever else we want to pull in. And now it's incorporating the why. So are you ready to start designing this thing, or aren't you? And then simultaneously, if they say they are, then the legal people can start to do their due diligence to determine what the legal binding document would be between the Y and the town, because that's not in our purview. Sure. And then at least we can start the process of getting a firm engaged.
What I would like to really start to create now with our recommendations to town council. All of these items that we've talked about this evening have been all connected to one point. That we need a architecture engineering firm to come in and design things. What I would ultimately like to put together is a report that outlines our latest charges. So we have a section that talks about the wetlands. We have a section that talks about how we're complying with the comp plan and all the action and goal items that we've since outlined. The conversations that we've had with the YMCA and how those have been all received very positively, and how we could see that as a benefit for the town. When we have the conversations with the Library Board of Trustees, the Parks and Rec, Senior Citizens Advisory Committee, Conservation Commission, when we have those conversations, add a blurb of part of a report in that says, these are some of the items that these groups and committees would like to see down at the Halliwell property. So we're basically building a program for the site that an architecture and engineering firm can come in, look at, easily identify, and say, okay, this is great. And we also have the ability now to say definitively to the town council that we're looking at partnering with the YMCA, with Parks and Rec, so we can achieve these goals, with the senior citizens, so we can achieve these goals. And we're also looking at having the Class 1 survey, so we can achieve these goals and be able to further along our plans. The other item on our discussion, our agenda tonight is for grants. The one thing that shows up that what we need, building plans. We can't get grants without them. So really, in front of, with all these other reports that's, you know, that we compile with the discussions that we've had and summarize them, we provide that small report to town council with the executive summary smacked on top of it that says, we've gone through all of these new charges that we were given at the beginning of the year. We've accomplished these. Here's how we've accomplished these. And now we feel that we are set now to go into the next phase of master planning. And I think if we definitively give all of that information compiled in a report, hand that to them, I don't see how they could say no.
So do you want to do that after this June meeting, or you want to do it now?
I would say do it after this June meeting, because then we have all of the information to present to them. You know, I understand the enthusiasm about the YMCA, but they also have to come with the understanding that this is a government project, and they move a lot slower than private and nonprofit jobs do. There has to be that level of expectation that we only meet once or twice a month. Town council only meets once or twice a month. They already have a pre-populated agenda in a lot of cases, and they need to get in, you know, the Wednesdays before all the meetings. So, you know, we have to set that level of expectation that it is exciting, and as motivated as we all are, we've all seen this. We would love to be in the master planning phase right now. We were ready 5 months ago. We were ready in December and November to keep moving. However, you know, things don't always go as smoothly as we'd like them to be. So,
We're battling over nuance, so
Right.
we've talked about it enough. I think we're all in agreement on the core principle, which is, let's make sure we agree now that we will have this meeting in June with affiliated municipal entities. And immediately thereafter, we will draft this report that we will send to the
I
council.
mean, we can even start on it now, too. So, you know,
To the preliminary stuff, yeah.
there are some folks that are very passionate about the YMCA. I would like you guys to take a stab at summarizing what came out from the meeting, and give a synopsis of, you know, what the Y is willing to do, how we thought that was received positively, and the things that we need to do to continue moving that forward. So, you know, I chuckled to myself when I heard Scott say that I like assigning homework assignments, so I'll be more than happy to have someone volunteer to write the report about the YMCA. When we have Parks and Rec, I'll also, you know, be more than happy to share the load of writing some of these reports. So I will certainly put that out for grabs with people writing for the Y situation.
I wasn't at the meeting, but I mean, I can read the responses to those answers, or, I mean, you know, they provided the
It's on YouTube.
documentation.
You can watch the whole meeting.
What's that?
It's on YouTube, you can watch it.
No, I know, but I wasn't here, so I
Oh,
didn't
no,
hear
no,
the whole
sir.
thing. I mean, I can put together something based on the way they responded prior to the meeting, and then others can fill in the blanks, you know. Chris can probably summarize the library, right?
Yep.
And what else is there to summarize at this point? Not yet, right?
So-
Seniors, we already know.
You know, we have the DEM, which I can take care of.
The seniors, we already know what, they've made it clear what their desires are.
Yeah, but I think
I mean, meaning which somebody can write it down. We already know.
overall a senior center, but, you know, what nuances of a senior center do they want to see in there? Is it going to be a place to have bridge groups? Is it going to be a place where they can go to exercise? Is it, you know, a little bit more of a definitive idea, so that way senior centers are a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Well, maybe what we should do, Jeff, then is prepare some questions similar to the questions we prepared for the Y prior to the meeting, and send it to these entities prior. So when they come here, they're focused. they can answer those specific questions instead of just
Yeah.
getting up and talking.
Yeah, and those were the questions that I posed to them in my invitation. So they're aware of the questions that I'm asking.
So they can work, those are their talking points or their,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I'll try to do some, I'm very busy, but I'll try to start to pull.
I'll try to give you some thoughts that I got from the meeting.
I'll send you some of mine as well.
Yeah,
Then we can mix it
Data
all
points.
together.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I just don't, I'm a little leery about writing it, because you guys, I don't know the format in which
I
you want it presented.
I'm just gonna give him my ideas.
It would be.
He can put it together and take those ideas
It
and
would
and
be,
make it sound
how would
good.
we present, if you were presenting to town council, how would you present this to town council?
Okay.
What were, if we're gonna sell this, how would you be selling this to town council?
Sales plan, gotcha. Okay.
In that,
Rewatch the YouTube. I watched it the other day again. It was a great meeting. They were very informative. They were very and council, we have to remind the council, Steve, to watch the YouTube before we meet with them with this proposal, because they'll understand what it's all about. Without seeing that, they're gonna be lost.
and that's where our report's gonna come in. It's gonna
Yeah.
fill in those blanks.
Well, but hopefully the council will watch it.
It's, I would hope that they watch it as well, but we need to provide the condensed version of them to blow through it,
helps, I watch it,
Oh.
twice, but I watched it once.
Jeff, quick question. I think we do, in your mind, you have a clear path to the legal methods as to the solicitation of the RFP for the design, right? That can be outside the qualification list, or we have to work within the qualification list? That was just for asbestos, right, the testing?
Yeah, that was just for asbestos. So we've already recommended an RFQ to the town council. That's already out there. I think as we've moved forward, it can take some evolution. We can have a 2.0 version.
But they
of it.
never formally acted upon it.
They never formally acted upon it, so, I mean, it's already written, so they could take it at their next, if it's on the agenda for their next meeting, they could move it forward, but, there might be some, they would likely refer it back to us to revise. Not the abatement. They haven't acted on the abatement either. They've put it forward.
What more do they need from us?
Nothing. It's all on, it's all on them right now.
not doing something?
I believe the abatement's gonna be on the next agenda.
And the only other question is, should you engage the solicitor to just get a brief opinion as to the methodology by which a municipality, is that just a simple contractual agreement that eventually will come to pass between the town and the entity, the Y? Or is it too early to start that? Just so to make him aware of the potential.
I can let them know that we'll be making the recommendation for town council to explore partnering with the YMCA. I think as far as we go, that's where we end, and he would pick up. I would not feel comfortable making any legal recommendations.
No, exactly, but the sooner we know whether there are legal pitfalls, the better. Or if it's smooth sailing and it's just a matter of negotiating a contractual agreement, just like any other, so be it. That can be worked out. But if he were to say, well, this is a hybrid, I can't comment on this yet, that would affect our ability to design.
They did, in their presentation, they did refer to a partnership they had with the city of Austin, Texas, multiple times. I'm thinking, we have to look at the other side too, and whether or not they know if it's viable, right? I don't know, they probably have already vetted that, or they may have. And have a realization that, this type of arrangement we're talking about is perfectly legal and something that they're familiar with and they can move forward on. So I'm thinking, based upon the conversations we've had with them, that they may already have the answer to that question.
And I can be corrected if I'm wrong on this, but I believe the town of Lincoln owns McCall. So
They
that,
said that. They said that.
there is some sort of precedent agreement
Yeah.
between a town and the YMCA that could potentially be a starting point for for the town.
Yeah. They did mention the word lease. So it's more of a if you will, landlord-tenant type arrangement than where the town retains ownership and they work for the town, if you will. So that's the impression I got.
Okay. Anything else on the Y? Before we move on, this one's going to be a quick one for the member updates on grant funding and research. We've had some folks fill out the Google form that I shared a while back, so thank you, Scott, Tony, Chris, for finding some more grants between Chaplin, some DEM grants. So again, as part of this ultimate report that we'd be compiling for town council, I'm going to slide those in there with all the responses that we've got. Again, underscoring the fact that a lot of these grants need plans. So, but as we kind of keep our eyes open, please feel free to continue filling in that information as grants come around. Whether you think they're applicable or not based on what we're doing, I think the more information the more grant potential we can provide, the better. I understand we are looking at hiring a grant writer. We could be working with them in concert, but at least we have some basis of a starting point of what we might be looking at.
So I know the town, you guys are talking about that right now, Steve, right? The idea of a grant writer working for the town and...
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at all options. We don't know if it's going to be something where it might be stipend-based or more of a consultant, contractual.
Don't they get a certain percentage if they write a grant?
No,
Administration of the grant?
there's a fine line, yes and no, depending on the grant, depending on what it's being used for. I would say a safe bet would be no.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that used to be the way it went.
Yep. But, case in point, I brought up at town council on Monday that the town of Cumberland hired a person that came over from North Providence, and this particular grant writer, and this is all public knowledge, so it's in the Valley Breeze, but this particular grant writer is getting $4,000 per month as I'm assuming a stipend. And in Cumberland, over the course of North Providence, in the course of 3 or 4 years, this particular grant writer brought in, it was something obscene, like $2.8 million. And then Cumberland, just year to date, this year so far, coming up on their end of their fiscal year, I think it's like 1.3 million, with several still pending.
Yeah, that's outstanding, and maybe the relationship is kind of symbiotic, right? We look at how that could help groups like us.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got some big projects we're looking at here in the town of North Smithfield. And, the police station certainly is going to be on the minds of a lot of taxpayers, as well as whatever direction we end up going in here at Halliwell. And a grant writer could potentially help those projects, so that would help the town or push the leadership into a direction of employing one, even if it's part-time or commission-based or however you want to look at it, and at the same time, what else they could do for the town. But I can tell you from experience, we're looking at it right now at the Veterans Memorial Stadium. We've got the first out-of-the-ground construction project going on in the town of North Smithfield, municipal construction project, since the middle school was built. So that's about 14 years ago, if my math is right. That's the first project we've had in town come out of the ground. And that happened because there was some out-of-the-box thinking that happened. And an agreement was made between a contractor and the town. So they had to look at things a little bit differently in how to get it done, and it's getting done right now. And I sat at a meeting 5 years ago when I was told by some leadership in this town that it couldn't happen. So you know what is happening?
Well, I think the other thing we have to consider too is when we're talking about going to other committees within the town, we have to strongly consider as well as we move to make these capital improvements in the town, whether it's a police station or project going on down at the turf, or even Halliwell, that is going to bring in people to the town to visit. So we have to think from an economic standpoint. It would just, to me, it would just make all the sense in the world to get the Economic Development Committee at least in the conversations and saying, okay, as we develop a master plan for Halliwell, we also need to, I don't know, if we bilaterally recommend that they develop a master plan around that area. Especially if we're gonna be moving the library. I mean, if that potentially happens, that's going to leave that area for a beautiful spot where, you know, maybe we put in, you know, a nice restaurant or a boutique or whatever.
I'd like to have access to our water. It would be very nice to be able to get or sit on our water and actually enjoy it. I know a lot of other people would too. I'm not just saying me.
Okay.
It's a great idea. The problem with the island is it's loaded. Poison ivy, poison oak, poison everything. And it's gonna take a major, major effort. You're talking about walking down behind the library? Or what are you talking?
No, I'm talking about the library building itself, the potential that you have there to bring in something like a restaurant where somebody could sit outside.
Okay. So
No.
I'm just going to call a point of order because we are
Okay.
wildly off course right now. That's fine. I didn't want to cut anybody off, but so, in addition, one more item for the grants. I know the planning department has been busy at it with ARPA funds and other grants that encompass the whole entire town. Police station, Halliwell, Scouters Hall, water towers. So there are other opportunities that are in the works, but just have nothing has come of them yet, but they've been worked on. All right. Does anybody else have anything else that we've missed within the agenda?
It's off the agenda, but I'm just curious, that Steve mentioned briefly the remediation work. Has any bids gone out for the demolition work, or is it part of the bid that you got?
I believe we last looked at combining the whole project between doing the analysis of the property and also what it would cost to condemn all the properties all at once. So it wasn't brought up at the last town council meeting. On Monday, I was out of town. The meeting before that, and I know it wasn't on the topic, but I'm fairly certain that it's going to be on the next agenda. Because I have not heard of any update, but I know that the time frame for them to get it done was sometime around beginning to middle of the summer.
For the abatement?
For the abatement.
Abatement, okay.
Yep.
All right. As far as I know,
yeah.
garden's moving forward.
Yep.
Okay, so if that's it for this evening, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Mayo, second. Second from Robert and Laurie. All in favor? Aye. All right, we are adjourned at 8:09. Thank you.